Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to the January 6, 2020 meeting of the Shawnee Planning Commission. We'll start with roll call. Commissioner Montgomery.
Here.
Commissioner Roth. Commissioner Peterson. Here. Commissioner Willoughby.
Here.
Commissioner Beanhoff.
Here.
Commissioner Busby is here. Commissioner Wise.
Here.
Commissioner Braley.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Nennick.
Here.
Commissioner Bingham. Here. Thank you. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The consent agenda. Items 1 and 2 are listed under the consent items agenda. Unless there is a request to remove an item from the consent agenda, the items will be approved in one motion. Is there a request to remove an item from the consent agenda? Not, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Mr. Wise?
Make a motion to approve consent items per staff recommendations.
Is there a second? Commissioner Braley?
Second.
Motion is second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you. On to new business, and before that, what I'd like to do is ask if there's any problem with the commission if we take item 2, which is the comprehensive plan amendments, and move that to the bottom of the list and take care of these business before we get to that part of it. Is there any problem with that with any commissioners? Then we shall do that. So we'll begin with new business SP 012001 and FP 012001, Arvest Bank at 6219 through 6225 Lucille Lane. Final site plan approval and final plat. Stephanie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. This is Stephanie Malmborg with Community Development, and I have a short staff report presentation for the Arvest Bank project. As you mentioned, this is SP 012001 and FP 012001. You may recall that they were in here back in November for a preliminary site plan approval and approval of some deviations to city policy, and now Arvest Bank is here with their final site plan and their final plat for your consideration this evening. The applicant proposes to construct a new 857 square foot bank with 3 ATM drive-through lanes at 6219 to 6225 Lucille Lane. It's roughly at the corner of the Shawnee Mission Parkway frontage road and Lucille Lane in the northeast corner of that intersection. And you can see on the screen here the project location relative to the city boundary. The proposed final site plan is much as you've seen in the approved preliminary site plan back in November. There have been some minor modifications to address some of the concerns that were in the previous staff report and previous discussion. A few of those being adding some sidewalk and crosswalk connections that you'll see on the north and south, going and meeting up with both frontage road to the south and then sort of north and then to the west meeting up with Lucille Lane. There's also been some minor modifications to some of the drive aisle widths, and the applicant did reduce that north drive aisle width that's just one way so that it's a little bit narrower per staff recommendations so that we're not encouraging wrong way traffic in that north drive aisle. So the site's going to have the same circulation you saw before, where the primary entrance to the ATMs is off of Lucille unless you go all the way around the building from frontage. And the primary entrance to the building itself is from frontage road going north. There's angled parking, and the angled parking meets all city standards for the angled parking and has the correct usable area of parking stall size within those angled spaces. There is one open item regarding the site plan in this case. There was something that we didn't catch before because some of the setbacks were not properly noted, and we noticed when we were looking at the final plat that the building lines were not correct on the final plat, And we caught that we do have an accessory structure, which is an ATM on the west side that doesn't meet the setback requirement. However, staff did look into this, and we have found that there are a couple other sites within the city that do have ATMs or similar accessory structures that are within a required front yard setback. So we are recommending that the Planning Commission consider approving this deviation to allow the accessory structure ATM and an 18-foot setback when the requirement is 30. And you can see here on this PowerPoint graphic that 30-foot setback in red dashed line, and then in blue you can see that 18 feet where the ATM is located. The proposed landscape plan includes planting materials that meet city requirements and in some cases exceed city requirements. They did add additional shrubbery along the north property line to buffer between the residential property to the north. And there are planting beds that have been added on the north and south sides of the building. And also they've added a location for a potential monument sign in the southwest corner of the property toward the intersection, and there's a plant bed around that monument sign as well. The proposed north elevation is on the screen currently. You can see there's still brick on this elevation, windows with spandrel glass on this elevation, and overall it has four-sided architecture by providing those windows. Even though they won't be a visible see-through window, they will be opaque. This is the south elevation on the screen now, and you can see there's some brick carried over on the west side of that south elevation, and then there is some, you can see the red blade, the ACM blade here in the middle, sort of breaking up where the windows start, and you will be able to see through these windows, and this will be sort of the primary facade that you view from Shawnee Mission Parkway. There will be signage on this facade as well, but signs do require separate sign permits, so what you see here on the rendering may or may not be to proper scale based on sign code, but you'll see a sign on this elevation. The east elevation is the side of the building where you'll see the cars pull up to those angled parking spaces, and that's the main entrance to the building. Again, this will be visible from Shawnee Mission Parkway when going westbound, and they have a sort of navy blue accent blade wall on this elevation. They also have some gooseneck light fixtures to highlight the sign on this facade, and as I said with the last facade, it's subject to meeting sign code and receiving a sign permit as well, but you'll see some signage similar to this on this facade as well. And lastly, the west elevation, you can see both of those accent walls, the blue and the red. You can see it, sort of the front face of what an ATM might look like. You can't see all three of them very well on this particular elevation, but this will be the side that has the ATM drive-through lanes, so you can still see through the building on this particular side as well. And there are windows and four-sided architecture on this side, and same goes for the signage. It will require a sign permit as well. Moving on to the final plat, there is another open item, and as I mentioned earlier, this is related to what we caught with that accessory structure and the building lines. The final plat needs to be revised to indicate a minimum 30-foot front building line on both the Lucille and the frontage road sides. So we're recommending that small revision, but we believe that the plat could be approved with that as a condition. And with that, we've provided some staff recommendations in your staff report. Basically, the conditions on those are the open items of approving a deviation and revision to the plat for the 30-foot building line. And then the final plat has a few conditions that we recommend, such as being contingent on the approval of the site plan, being recorded, meeting all bulk and use requirements for the CH district. All street light and public improvements are required to be constructed in accordance with the site plan, and the applicant is responsible for obtaining any other permits that are required for the process. And that concludes my staff report.
Thank you, Stephanie. Is the applicant present? If you come forward and state your name and address, please.
Sayre, and I'm representing Davidson Architecture and Engineering, 4301 Indian Creek Parkway, Overland Park, Kansas.
Are you in agreement with staff recommendations?
Yes, we are.
Does the commission have any questions for applicant or staff? Commissioner Wise?
Quick question, and I'm not sure if this is staff or applicant, but the mechanical, electrical equipment, is there anything mounted on the roof, and is there electrical gear outside that needs to be screened?
No, anything on the roof would not be visible, but there are no mechanical units. There will be a meter on the outside of the building and a water meter in the right-of-way, but.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This is for staff, and it isn't, I want to be clear, it is specific to this project, but it's more of a question in general. With regards to any kind of redevelopment like this, as we're moving forward with anything along the frontage road, I see that we're giving, everybody their own entrance. When we have an adjacent property, is there ever any discussion when projects like this come about, or looking to the future, that we'd be looking to combine entrances into properties and adjacent properties to cut down on the numbers of entrances along the frontage road?
Good evening, Doug Allman, Community Development staff. Yes, absolutely. This is a half-acre size site, and so they're really limited. We tried to push those entrances as far away from the intersection as we could, but if they were taking down, for instance, a lot to the north as well, we would have had a shared driveway probably that would have straddled the property line to provide dual access to both of those lots. And we do try to limit, especially on busy frontage roads or more major type streets, the number of cuts that we provide. And so to answer your question, yes, we absolutely look at that on every application. This lot is so small, and it's taking out a property for infill redevelopment, that essentially what we have is kind of what we get. The nice thing about it is that they didn't try to have two approaches off of the north-south street, essentially kept it a one-way circulation. So in our mind, it meets our requirements, and luckily we have a traffic manager that looked at it. I think he's comfortable with those locations as well.
Yeah, like I said, my concern wasn't really specifically with this, but it brought up the thought, as we're going to be seeing hopefully more redevelopment along frontage roads, that are we going to be looking at that?
Access control is always something that's very important to us as we redevelop, or even as we do greenfield development in other parts of the city. You see a lot of plats that come in with a site plan that are actually delineated with access control that specifically ties down a driveway location. And oftentimes those locations are wide enough to afford access to two properties. We've even changed our subdivision regulations that allows cross-access on commercial and industrial through properties rather than having to punch out another entrance onto a major street. So we certainly look at it.
Great, thanks, Doug.
Any other questions for applicant or staff? I have one question, and that is, this seems to be pretty tight turning radius on the northeast corner of this.
That was actually reduced in the northeast corner just because of it being a one-way.
Since I have seen plenty of people that are landscape people and have a pickup with a 20-foot trailer, can that make that turn?
I can do a traffic drawing to see with a trailer if it would make it, yes. We usually just do.
If you don't know at this point in time if somebody pulling a trailer with lawnmowers on it can make that turn?
I have not analyzed it with a trailer, only a four-door truck pickup, a large bed pickup, a van, SUV. Those have all been analyzed, but not with a trailer.
Okay, another question for you is, on your plans you also show a clearance bar.
Yes.
And that is the clearance bar to keep, and I couldn't tell from the plans whether that goes all the way across there, or is that just on what would be the ATM setting next to the bank. I couldn't tell from the plans how far out the clearance bar went.
It does not go across the entire drive. Lynn, do you have any more information on the complete purpose? Okay.
And I'm assuming that's for the height, so that somebody doesn't run through. It would seem to me, once you've come into these lanes and you're clear up next to there, that a clearance bar, when you're setting right at that, could make it very difficult. Now, it doesn't, it would seem to me that clearance bar might be better spaced if it's further back.
This is the standard that Arvest Bank has used on all of their sites, and they haven't had an issue with it. I can get more details and information for you, but we haven't had, I guess, any problems on any sites so far. This is the standard that they've been using all over the country.
Maybe to a certain extent that's protecting your customers, but it would seem to me that a clearance bar after you drove that far up is going to be somewhat of a, if I left my step ladder on top of my car, it means I've got to back completely out of there. And it seems like it might be more appropriate being set up further to where you're not completely in there with possibly cars behind it. So that, and I think that might not be so much our issue, it might be an issue that you should address with your customers.
Okay, yes, we will definitely look into that and see if there's a better placement available.
The other thing is you have 3 ATMs, and I'm sure somebody could tell me why you want 3 rather than 2. Because 2 would open up that side, that west side of that lot, if it was 2 ATMs. Somebody want to explain why 3 is so very, very important instead of just 2?
Again, Lynn might have more information on this, but based on all of the information from the Arvest Bank users, this will be a highly trafficked area for the customers in Shawnee that go to this bank. All of their banks so far have had 3, and they're highly utilized. I don't think that they would want to decrease it to 2, just to make sure that customers can get in quick and out quick.
We're crowding this into a very small area, and that's why I'm wondering is, can somebody explain to me why 3 is necessary instead of just 2?
I don't personally have those numbers on why they specifically need 3. I'm sure they have studies out there, and that's another thing I can get back to you on and give you the answers for.
I would have hoped to get an answer tonight because we are trying to approve all this. So it's kind of, I guess, we're going to commission discussion about it, but it would seem if we're crowding this into there and we've made allowances for you to be able to move into this space, that maybe 2 would be.
We don't necessarily feel
Okay.
like we're crowding it into this space. We have decreased the lane widths, and we have room to go back to doing 2-way if we need to, and we angled the parking to make sure that we had more width, and we also increased the width of the drives of the ATM to make it more user-friendly to get through the site. But I think at this point, the way that the site plan stands, we don't feel like we're crowding it into the space.
Mr. Doug Allman, do you have a comment on this?
So I've been involved with this for probably over a year. And the way that it was explained to me, and the necessity of having 3 versus 2 is because your retail space inside the bank is smaller. They anticipate this to be predominantly an auto-oriented bank facility rather than walk-up customers. And these are not just ATMs, they're ITMs. They're those interactive teller machines, so they really serve not only as an ATM, but also as a teller. It basically is like a teller lane because it's interactive. And so the necessity of 3 is to really handle the traffic volume that they anticipate at the site because the interior of the building is smaller than a normal branch. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of how it was
maybe I can
explained.
directly ask you this. You don't have a problem with it being 3 because, like I say, we're really crowding everything into this small place, and we're happy to do it.
Right.
But is 3 necessary, and you feel like it's not
I
an
would
issue?
say this, Dennis, that in this particular instance, the way that the site is oriented, the rectangular shape, it's a corner lot. They have enough room to have 3 and have it not impact or negatively impact traffic on site or off site. I will say this too, if these were attached to the building, for instance, a canopy extension from the building, the setback would have to be met. There are other instances, Shawnee Mission Parkway and Flum, that the ATM, standalone ATM is pretty far into the setback there. Again, that was kind of an afterthought infill site. And then the location at Midland and Renner, There's a Commerce ATM on that corner. There's a 40-foot commercial neighborhood setback in that particular instance, and it's about half of that. And we've seen no ill effects of that ATM on that parking lot or that gas canopy. So as at staff level, we're very comfortable with the layout, and it is exactly compliant with what we saw at the preliminary development plan phase.
Very fine, thank you, Doug. Any other questions for applicant or staff? If not, then this doesn't require a public hearing on it, does it? If not, then we're in commission discussion.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wise.
Hearing no discussion, I'll make a motion. We need to make two motions, Stephanie? Okay. Make a motion to approve SP 01-20-01 for Arvest Bank at 62196 through 6225 Lucille Lane. Final site plan approval per staff recommendations.
Is there a second? Commissioner Roth? Motion and a second to approve SP 0120-01 Arvest Bank at 6219 Sioux 6225 Lucille Lane. Any other comments? Commissioner Beanoff.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to abstain from this item due to a conflict of interest.
Thank you.
I'd like to do
Commissioner
the same
Nunn.
due to conflict of interest.
Very fine. Both have a perceived conflict of interest and will be abstaining on this. Any other discussion? We have a motion and a second for approval of SP 0120-01 and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you. Noting the two abstentions. Very fine. That leaves us with the final plan. Commissioner Peterson.
I move that we approve FP-01-20-01 Arvest Bank at 6219 through 6225 Lucille Lane, final plat to include the staff's recommendation or exception to the 30-foot setback, the open item.
Thank you. Is there a second? Commissioner Les Smith?
Second.
Motion is second for approval of FP 0120-01 Arvest Bank at 6219 through 6225 Lucille Lane, per staff recommendations and exceptions. Any further discussion? Commissioner Beanoff.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to abstain from this item due to a conflict of interest.
Thank you. Commissioner Nunnick. Both are abstaining due to a perceived conflict of interest. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you very much. Moving on, now we're going to SP 022001 Seafood Island at 10810 West 75th Street. Special use permit being asked for. Staff?
Thank you, Chairman. Stephanie Malmborg again with Community Development, and I do have a short presentation for Seafood Island's special use permit request as well. This is SUP 022001, and a public hearing is required for this item. Seafood Island is located at 10810 75th Street, and it is the former Ryan's Restaurant building, if you are familiar with that area. The property is zoned CN, and it's generally located in the northeast corner of Neiman and 75th, as you can see on the screen in that location map on the last slide. The surrounding zoning, as I mentioned, this site and also the remainder of the Tomahawk Commercial Center is zoned CN, Commercial Neighborhood. And there is some R1 single-family residential zoning to sort of the northeast of the site, on the north side of 75th Street and east side of Valentine Street. And then we have some RGA zoning, which is residential garden apartment zoning, sort of to the south of the site across 75th Street on the south side. A photo of the existing restaurant and their monument sign is provided on this slide here. And I'd like to go over the requests and requirements and operations for the special use permit now. The applicant is requesting a special use permit for a restaurant with live entertainment. The need for the special use permit comes from the request for the live entertainment portion of the land use. A restaurant without live entertainment is a permitted use in the CN district. So in order to have the live entertainment at the restaurant, they need an approval for a special use permit. This request does not include any exterior site improvements. The applicant's doing some minor refreshing of the landscaping and parking lot, and also will be installing new wall signage. And the applicant did freshen up some of the paint, but the paint colors are in kind with what was existing before, as you can see in the photo. Seafood Island is a restaurant featuring seafood dishes. And as part of the business model, the applicant wishes to provide live entertainment from time to time, and all live entertainment is proposed to end by 9:30 p.m. So this is not a late night entertainment type venue. However, sound is a concern anytime we have live entertainment requests. We did receive an email from one of the residents that received a public hearing notification, and we've printed that out for the Planning Commission. You should have one at each of your desks. Chairman, if you'd like to read it aloud for the record when we get to the public hearing, feel free to do so, but we wanted you all to have a copy of that because she was unable to be here this evening. Other than that, staff has not received any correspondence to date, but we do have an open public hearing where residents are welcome to speak later this evening if they have concerns and questions. Staff is slightly concerned on what type of exactly live entertainment is proposed here. Is it more background music? Is it concerts? Being that it ends at 9:30, it's likely that it's more background music, but we encourage the Planning Commission to ask the applicant exactly what the plans are for the type of performances and live entertainment they would like to have. And we'd also like to know what level of soundproofing is already in the building, and if there are issues, if the applicant's willing and able to provide additional soundproofing if it becomes a nuisance issue. The staff report also includes 8 considerations from our code and state statute for all zoning decisions and special use permits. So feel free to take a look at those considerations, and we'll see them on our next slide here for reference. So again, you can see the Seafood Island considerations I mentioned and the general considerations on the slide in front of you here. And with that being said, the staff recommendation includes conditions that the governing body must approve a special use permit. All live entertainment must end by 9:30. The live entertainment will remain indoors. And we also suggest a condition for soundproofing to be added if valid noise complaints are received by the city. And at some point we would deem that, we've had enough complaints and soundproofing will become necessary. It's kind of a gray area, but at least it gives us something to go back to if there are complaints before we would review it within 1 year, as it's typical for any other special use permit. And that concludes my staff report.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Is the applicant present?
Yes.
If you'd come forward and state your name and address.
Yeah, my name is Eric Ning. I'm the owner for Seafood Island. I try to, apply for a special use permit to, like, weekend, Friday and Saturday night, the playing, live music or something.
Could you give us your address, Eric?
The address is 10810 West 75th Street, Shawnee.
Very fine. Are you in agreement with staff recommendations?
What is that for?
Recommendations of the staff's recommending, what the staff recommending, that all live music must be done by 9:30. Live entertainment will have to be indoors, and the soundproofing may have to be added to the building if there's complaints.
Yeah.
And then we'll redo this in 1 year.
Yeah.
Very fine. Does the commission have questions for applicant or staff? Commissioner Montgomery?
I'll ask the question about the type of live music that you are thinking you would have. Is it more of the background type or after dinner? Louder?
Well, actually, we depends, how the, when we hire, the band or they try to play what kind of music or something, and they're not. I think not very true now, I'm sorry, yeah, I can't, speak very, very good on that size.
Do you have another question, Mr. Montgomery? Is the music going to be loud?
I don't think so, because that building is pretty big, and the music, of course, they need a customer they can hear that. So I don't think so. We're gonna be hurt somebody, yeah, very.
In other words, it isn't a heavy rock band or something. You're not planning on having heavy metal, heavy rock band, something like that.
What you say? Can you say again one more time? Sorry, I'm not very good English. So.
I can assure you, your English as a second language is better than my version of your language, your native language. So don't worry, you're fine.
Okay.
But it's not going to be loud music. That's the question.
I think it's not right now.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for applicant or staff?
Chairman.
Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Stephanie. I believe the technical definition of a noise ordinance violation is noise which crosses the property line from the property line one property line to another. It just seems a little ambiguous as, a valid noise complaint. What are we defining as a valid noise complaint?
Per city code, we do have, I believe, certain decibel levels that have to be measured within certain distances from the building or the property line. So that's why I put in there a valid noise complaint, because we get noise complaints often and they aren't always valid. So I made sure to put that terminology in there, that it be a valid complaint. And obviously, we would have to use our best judgment in the community development department to see, exactly how many of those noise complaints are going to trigger the need for the soundproofing and how often we're getting those complaints. I mean, if the applicant has their opening later this month and every time they have Friday, Saturday night music for the first 3 weekends, then we know we have a problem right off the bat. But if it's once during the summer for 4th of July, because it's on a Friday this year, I think, then it's probably not as big of an issue. So if the planning commission and the city council trust that staff can oversee that noise complaint condition, we feel comfortable managing how that might play into the requirement for soundproofing.
Okay, thanks. And I just really, my point was almost a question I almost knew the answer to, was that it's at least rooted in something specific on the city ordinances, which could be decibel levels, which could be, a few years ago, there was not a residential noise ordinance, if you will, and that's where the whole property line thing came from. So long as we're tying it to something specific, then I guess the ambiguity probably works both ways. So, and we do trust you. That's all, sir.
Any other, Commissioner Braley?
Well, as a follow along to that comment question, then explain to me then, if a complaint comes in, how do you investigate the decibel levels when the event has occurred in the past? And are you been out there the following week? Maybe talk through the process of how you would validate a complaint.
Yeah, so the police department will be informed of the noise complaint, and since they work a little bit more often than we do down in community development, there's always someone there to go to the site and check on that complaint at the time that it's occurring.
Okay, so they have the equipment to measure the decibel levels?
We would have to go out and investigate separately. If it became a recurring problem,
Okay,
we get involved.
okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions for applicant or staff? And I presume one other thing we should discuss on here is outside amplification. Because occasionally people have patios. Do you have a patio, Eric?
No.
So I would say we also would want the inside music being amplified to the outside speakers. Does that make sense? Correct. Only the music can be amplified inside.
Okay, yeah. No problem.
Yeah. Very fine. Any other questions for applicant or staff? If not, thank you, Eric. And this would mean we are in public hearing.
Well, thank
As it's
you.
especially, I'm sorry?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now we're in a public hearing. Does anybody from the public wish to comment on this matter? If you'd like to comment, please come forward and state your name and address.
Cynthia Perel, 7401 Valentine Street. It's only 119 steps from my front door to his front door. My only issue is that in the past with Ryan's, we had an issue with the trash. Ryan's didn't close the doors, they didn't break down the boxes, and it all ended up in my front yard. That's the only issue I'll have with it, is to make sure the trash is taken care of properly.
Very fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other people wish to comment on the item in front of us? If not, then the public hearing is closed. And oh, I'm sorry, it isn't closed until I read this. How did I get volunteered to read this? I'm horrible at this. This is from a Michelle Braun. To whom it may concern, this concerns Seafood Island and live entertainment. I have lived at 7417 Valentine Street in Shawnee for almost 15 years and went through the bar across the street that had entertainment. It was a nightmare. I unfortunately had to call the police on several occasions because of noise issues. I was not the only one. I would come to the meeting but cannot drive at night, and since your meeting is at 7:30 p.m. it is an issue for me. As construction goes on in the building, I've had to retire to watching TV in my bedroom that is in the back of the house because of the compressor, which I found acceptable because it was only daytime hours and working on the building. I live in an older home with no insulation and old windows, which I cannot afford to do anything about. George Karras owns the property, but he is in his 90s and leaves all this to me. I was going to buy this house when he passed, but this would change all of my plans. Why can they not just have good food? Why can they not just have good food? I am not a complainer. I was always try to work it out, but this is too much. Property value will go down and neighbors will start leaving that are barely hanging on as is. To me, this is a non-issue. If they want to have live entertainment and soundproofing their building rather than us having to soundproof our homes. Thank you from Michelle Braun. So that was read into the notes of the meeting. If anyone else wishes to comment, then the public hearing is closed and we're in commission discussion. Commissioner Peterson.
I understand the issues that Michelle brought in her email, as well as this property does back up to a very residential area and has been there for a long time. I don't want to condemn a new business to the practices of an older business that may not have taken care of their trash. So I think this is something good to go in there on 75th Street. We're looking for solid businesses to be in those open places and continue to give Shawnee residents an option to eat at. So I think we should be in favor of this and make sure that we monitor the noise level so that the neighborhoods can coexist.
Motion?
Yeah, Commissioner Beanoff.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I would agree with Commissioner Peterson. And, you know, that's the good thing about the special use permit is we do have the ability to have the property or the business owner come back in, the special use permit owner. If there are complaints, that we could certainly have the ability to address that fairly quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I would agree with the two of you, and the benefit is that across Valentine is the fronts of these houses versus the backyards backing up. All of that being said, I would like to move that we approve SUP 022001 Seafood Island at 10810 West 75th Street. Special use permit subject to conditions listed on staff report.
Commissioner Montgomery.
I second the motion.
Motion and second to approve. Motion and second to approve SUP 022001 Seafood Island at 10810 West 75th Street, special use permit. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Eric, thank you and welcome to our community. And that means we're moving on now. Next on the agenda is SUP 032001 New City Church Early Learning Academy at 7320 Quivira Road for a special use permit. Stephanie.
Thank you, Chairman. Stephanie Malmborg with Community Development with another short report for the New City Church Early Learning Academy Special Use Permit request. This is SUP 032001, and a public hearing is required for this item as well. The New City Church is located at 7230 Quivira Road, roughly just north of 75th Street along Quivira Road on the west side of the street. You can see here on the location map on your screen, the project location relative to the border of the city. The subject property is zoned R1, and you can see surrounding it on most sides is R1 zoning. However, in the vicinity, we do have some PD planned development, some more R1 on the other side of Quivira, and also in the Westbrook shopping center, we have the RHR residential high-rise and the PUD-OC, which is planned unit development, office and commercial zoning. Here's a photo of the east side of the building. So this is primarily the church entrance. You can also see their front row of parking and their monument sign, and then Quivira Road off to the right of the screen. And I'd like to go through some of the requirements and business functionality of the Early Learning Academy while you're looking at the photo of the entrance there, where you can go from the parking lot on the east side of the building, sort of around the south corner of the building, into that kind of discrete door on the back side of the building. So per chapter 17.51 of the Shawnee Municipal Code, a child care center as a principal use is permitted by right or by special use permit within certain commercial zoning districts. And this is sort of an interesting scenario because the principal use of this building is a church. That's the primary use of the building. And the child care center has always been sort of accessory to that principal use of the church. When we got this application in, I did some research into the past approvals for this building, and essentially for the last 20-something or more years, this building has been a church with an accessory child care center, and we've always approved it as such. with special use permits. If you look in our table, we don't account for a child care center being allowable in R1 at all as a primary principal or accessory use. So in this case, we wanted to make sure this report notates that we're calling the principal use the church and the accessory use the child care center. In a future code update, we may make sure to add that in for the R1 category and any other applicable residentially zoned categories when they also have churches with accessory daycares. But at this time, since it's already been approved as that type of use in the past, and we have no other way to really notate it for the code, I wanted to make sure for the record and for the report that if someone reads this back, they don't think we're just crazy. So, with that being said, since the past uses have not had any major complaints, in fact, I'm not aware of any complaints that they've had with the child care center, we wanted to bring this forward to you and let you know more about the specific business here with the new ownership through the New City Church. And this also does not include any consideration for exterior site alterations, just like our last approval. So as noted, in the past, this has been used for childcare in the first floor of the building as well. And it's varied from the amount of children. I believe the first special use permit we found on file was for 29 children. The latest one with the previous owner was for up to 36 children. And the applicant is licensed for up to 46 children. So the number of children has changed throughout the years with the different operators and owners of the church. And this new special use permit would account for the 46 children. So there is an increase based on what was approved in the past. The applicant has 4 classrooms on the first floor of the building, and the ages of the children are from 2 weeks to school age. And there are a certain number of teachers required based on the ages and quantities of the children in those classrooms. They will employ up to 7 teachers and a program director at full capacity, and they operate from 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. All of those requirements and hours are very similar to what we saw in special use permit requests of the past, and the state mandates those teacher to student ratios and the age ratios as well. There's another photo on the screen showing the entrance from a little bit different angle, and then you can also see the playground. The site does have ample parking. There's a large parking lot to the north of the building that can supply parking for the church needs, as well as if there is a strange influx of parents pick up, drop off at certain times for the daycare. As you saw in the previous picture, there is a sidewalk that safely links the vehicles and the parents that'll be coming up down here to drop off to the main door. And traffic enters the site primarily through Quivira Road, although there is an entrance off of 72nd Street to the north that is then funneled out to Quivira to the east. And on your screen, you'll see the photo of the playground from the south side. And just as we had in our last presentation, there are some considerations, and I wanted to bring these up for the Planning Commission to consider as well. Specific to the New City Early Learning Academy, thinking about, does this request differ from the use of the building previously? Essentially, it's just the quantity of children that have changed. We put on here the second one is, will the increased quantity of children have a negative impact on traffic? In this case, the pickup and drop-offs, I'm imagining they stagger based on the parents' availability throughout the day. And I'm sure the applicant can talk more if they ever have issues with too many people coming and going at the same time. And number 3, is there a safe route between the entrance and the parking lot? Anytime you look at daycares, childcare, you want to make sure that there's no vehicle conflicts and that the children have a safe way to get to and from. In this case, the parents are walking the children in and out of the facility, and there's no real children just running in on their own, and there is a safe sidewalk. And then at the bottom of the screen and in the staff report, you'll see the general considerations for special use permits as well. And for this, our recommendation is that the governing body must approve the special use permit, that it be limited to 46 children, the hours of operation be between 7 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. The current special use permit issued to Grace Christian Fellowship be withdrawn, which was actually part of your consent agenda already this evening, so we've already completed that condition, and then it's subject to review in 1 year. And with that, that concludes my staff report.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Is the applicant present? If you come forward and state your name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Brandy Peterson, and the address is 7230 Quivira Road, Shawnee, 66216.
Linda Pearson, are you in agreement with staff recommendations?
Yes, sir.
Very fine, thank you. Does the commission have any questions for applicant or staff? Commissioner Peterson?
I think this is mainly for staff, but possibly you. I know that sometimes in daycares like this, that they will offer like a holiday parents shopping event where they can bring their kids in to the school that they know, and they have an evening hours as a change. Would that require them to come in and get another special use permit for something like that if they ever think to do something, or a date night for parents or whatever?
A special event would not constitute the need for a new special use permit because this was talking about the day-to-day use of the site. They may need a special event permit depending on the parameters of the special event that they're having. Mark would be a great person to ask about what would trigger that. But for the most part, the need for noting anything on the special use permit I don't think is necessary for infrequent events like that.
And one more question. I don't see the daycare moving from 36 to 45, the previous special use permit, to the current request, being a negative impact. I live in the area. Quivira is more than welcome to handle that. We're glad to see that it's going to stay there. My one question is are we looking at just this, or are we looking at the development that's within a mile of there? We've got the new Kenneth Smith States moving in across the street. We have Westbrook with a high-rise going in. Don't think that the children are going to have to worry about either one of those impacting them, but I just want to make sure that we're looking at the entire picture, not 7 kids' families.
Yeah.
But there are other impacts on that part of the road.
And I think there is something interesting to note on that as well, with traffic being a potential concern with adding more children coming. The Westbrook Green project, according to the latest conceptual plans we've seen since our discussions when we brought it to you guys, I think in October, for that TIF compliance check, if you remember seeing that conceptual plan. Part of the original plans were to add another traffic signal, and we're still thinking that might be necessary, and the traffic signal would actually connect to the church's entrance across. So it could potentially give the church a way to be able to enter and exit the site to make safer turn movements onto Quivira. But it's still conceptual at this stage, but it could be a possible improvement.
It's good to know we're looking at that.
Commissioner Montgomery?
Question for staff. Yes, you said we should consider the increase in the number of children there. Does staff have any concern about that? Is it fairly inconsequential in the big picture of things, or?
In the big picture, I would say the jump of 10 more children really just, I think a lot of the time, and the applicant can speak to this, it's probably accounting for some siblings too, so it may not be making necessarily more traffic. It's just one more child coming to the same daycare with the same parents and drop off and pick up, so the applicant can give you more information about that specifically. But I believe the site has the capacity for the additional traffic or parking. And because it's not a stay and park there all day sort of thing, there's not as much of a conflict with the lack of parking. So I believe the church also isn't necessarily having their peak times during the same times that you would see the pickup and drop off. So I think the applicant should take a look at answering that question for you, but in staff's opinion, we don't believe there'd be a conflict.
Yes, sir. And basically what we've seen is we have an infant and toddler room, and so we have multiple families with children that are in our infant room, a 2-year-old room, and then our pre-K room. We actually have 3 families experiencing that situation, where in the past it's we've had children that are only 2.5 to 4, so it's a much smaller age range. But just in same number of families, different number of children able to come to one location versus we had a few families that were making multiple stops during their morning.
Commissioner Wise.
Quick question on that. The entrances might be for staff or applicant. Does that have to be an accessible entrance, or is there an alternate route for them to enter the building? Because I'm looking at it, appears it's beyond a 1 in 12 slope down there. So I don't know if there's another means for them to get in. It's easily identified if they need an accessible entrance.
So the church is responsible for maintaining ADA accessibility. Every time that the city is reviewing plans, the architect is signing off that they meet ADA codes. And in this case, I believe the church has an accessible entrance elsewhere, and they have elevators available as well. Is that correct?
We have the accessible entries,
Okay.
both upper level and lower level, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions for applicant or staff? I have a couple questions, and one of it is, Ms. Pearson, have you been running the daycare over there for Christian Fellowship?
I did not run it when it was Grace. I started on June 1st of this year, but my background is 20 years I've been in early childhood.
Okay, so you're very experienced with this.
Yes, sir.
Good, thank you very much. Another question for staff is normally, if it's a new permit, we have the fire marshal weigh in on it. If this changeover on this, do we still ask that the fire marshal check to make sure the facility is safe?
I think with the the business license for this, they would have done an inspection, and I believe the applicants had all of the required state inspections for licensure. So she can tell you all the inspections she's had to get to the licensing for the 46 children.
And I've heard before from people that the state requires inspections after inspections after inspections. But would it be pertinent if she has that copy, she get a copy of the fire inspector's report to you? So we know that that was taken care of?
I can look into it and see if that's something that we received with the business license application. And if not, I'm sure they could supply it to us.
We received those inspections from the fire station.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Any other questions for applicant or staff? Commissioner Bienhoff?
Yes, just curious. It sounds like the daycare is already in operation, but we're just now looking at the special use permit. Could you help me understand that a little bit better?
So in this particular case, the daycare has been in operation throughout the change of ownership, and I believe the trigger in this case for the applicant to come here was the increase in the number of children and the change in the state licensure. So I don't think necessarily we knew and they knew that when the change of ownership from one church entity to the other church entity would trigger the need for the special use permit. But because of the increase of the children, we wanted to make sure to bring it back to the planning commission because it wasn't just adding one child to the license or taking one off. Primarily everything else is the same though. They're still using classrooms on that first floor. They're still operating from 7 to 5:30 Monday through Friday. But we did want to bring them here to account for the ownership and the increase of children.
And would an ownership change normally trigger a new special use permit in a perfect world?
In a perfect world, I would say, yes, we would like to have someone in here, just like we see restaurants sometimes changing ownership and then they have to come in for a new live entertainment special use permit or something like that. We like to try and catch those, but in this case, it was just one that I think some of the paperwork was behind on our part with the business licensing and making sure to keep that up to date. And then when we were notified of the new state licensing through their daycare, we made sure to get that updated as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions for applicant or staff? If not, thank you, and we will be in public hearing on the matter of SUP 032001. Does anybody from the public wish to weigh in on this matter? Seeing no one raising their hand or moving forward, then the public hearing will be concluded and will be in commission discussion. Commissioner Beanhoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that childcare is always something that is needed in the community, and I know that we've had childcare in this location for a number of years, and although it's in a residential area, it's certainly right next to Quivira, which should be able to handle the traffic from my perspective, although I'm not a traffic engineer or professional, but I think it's a good use and good service to the community to continue this.
Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Braley?
Yeah, I would just add in regarding the traffic, I think by comparison to church letting out all at once compared to the trickle of parents that would be coming in, picking up their kids, the area's already shown that it can handle that type of traffic, so that's certainly not a concern for me.
Any further discussion? Someone care to make a motion? Commissioner Montgomery?
I move we approve SUP-03-20-01, special use permit for New City Church Early Learning Academy at 7230 Quivira Road, subject to the conditions outlined by staff.
Is there a second? Commissioner Nenick?
Second the motion.
Motion is second for approval of SUP 0320-01, New City Church Early Learning Academy at 7230 Quivira Road, special use permit per staff recommendations. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you. Welcome. That moves us to City of Shawnee. City of Shawnee Comprehensive Plan Amendments, Chapter 5 and Chapter 8. Lauren?
Good evening.
It's a great evening.
All right, this is actually a continuation of the public hearing from December 16, 2019. So I'm just going to review this information. You all were provided with your agenda packets, the existing comprehensive plans for Chapter 5, Chapter 8, and the maps that we are proposing to amend, then also those proposed amendments to each of those chapters, and that all is drafted in great detail with all of the updated information. We are talking about comprehensive plan amendments specific to downtown Shawnee, which is generally 55th Street to Shawnee Mission Parkway, and our east city limits over west to Quivira Road. The proposed amendments, various iterations have been reviewed by the Shawnee Downtown Partnership over 3 of their meetings in 2019, as well as this review body. And again, this is a continuation of a hearing from December. The specific amendments include adding a new town square mixed-use designation within the Chapter 5 general land use policies. This designation, we added it instead of including it with the mixed-use destination as separate. Because there are some differentiations within the downtown district, this allows for more flexibility, increased residential and commercial densities, and then a mix of uses horizontally and vertically as well. Kind of one of the bigger elements that would be different from potentially other mixed-use developments we would see in Shawnee is that it's likely going to be infill or redevelopment. So we're probably looking at smaller scale sites, and in looking at how that would fit into the existing downtown areas as far as design, and working with businesses or residential properties that are adjacent to those. Additionally, the amendment includes updating the downtown section of the land use guide. This includes removing all of the existing text. A lot of it hasn't been updated for 10 plus years, so it was somewhat out of date, referencing existing conditions, things like that. The new background was included within this downtown section, which references the multitude of studies, action plans, and implementation activities that we've undertaken in the last 10 plus years. Is a combination of all of those actions as well as recommendations, and included new subsections, including goals and objectives, implementation, town square mixed use information, and then mixed residential guidance on how that could be incorporated specifically into 3 different neighborhoods. In addition, we included updates to the land use guide map. So this is not, we've gone through kind of each different site. On the screen, you'll just see what's current on the left-hand side and then what's proposed on the right-hand side. The majority of the changes are changing to the town square mixed use within our general commercial areas, and then some other additional incorporation of residential, some differentiation within what kind of that orange hatching. That's that new, the mixed density residential, which we provided. What you see is this neighborhood redevelopment guide, which includes text about cohesive and compatible development. The Chapter 8 amendments include amending the section called Issues and Recommendations. There was a section in there specific to Neiman Road. Again, this is a little out of date, talking about we needed to go to the lane diet. So this is actually removing that text and updating it to include new recommendations from the Community Connections Neiman Corridor Study, as well as the Neiman Road reallocation of right-of-way study, and of course the Neiman Now projects, which we are wrapping up this year. The recommendations for that include access management, parking and other circulation, address concerns with those, and then inclusion of bicycle and pedestrian facilities and connectivity. In addition to updating the text, there was a additional amendment to remove realignment of Valentine Street. We will be updating the circulation plan map with that. Staff's recommendation is to hold the public hearing, amending the comprehensive plan, chapters 5 and 8. After the public hearing, then recommend the Planning Commission approve a resolution to adopt the comprehensive plan amendments as proposed and forward their review to the governing body for final approval.
Is that it, Lauren?
That's it.
Does the commission have any questions for Lauren? Commissioner Peterson.
Excuse me. This would be in the land use guide, and it is on page 5.2, and the first paragraph, so it's the second page, says residential land use, and maybe it's me, maybe it's not me, no answers there, but it says residential land use is a dominant form of land use in Shawnee. The planning process must emphasize the protection of established residential areas in order to enhance the Shawnee's regional status as a desirable, stable bedroom community. I would really like to strike the word bedroom.
Is that beyond what's included in these text amendments?
Which
are they proposed?
Yeah, oh, okay. I was reading the same line in the original, my apologies.
Which page was it?
5.2. It's the second sentence under residential land use.
Sure. So we didn't tackle all the sections of this comprehensive plan, but certainly I will note that.
It's obviously up for discussion if I'm the only person that is offended by that. I understand that most communities are made up mostly of residential, but I know that in the last few years, we have been looking to broaden our scope and not be labeled 1950. And I was just curious how anybody else felt about that.
Does anyone else up here wish to comment on that?
Chickens.
Any other questions for the staff on this matter? Commissioner Braley?
Well, I'll just chime in support of that. I mean, that's a something we've talked a lot about, and it certainly does have some connotations in the development world, and certainly has some ramifications as far as how the makeup of our tax base is built. So I certainly want to have that removed as well.
Any other questions for staff or comments? Commissioner Montgomery?
I don't know that I'm offended by that word, but I wouldn't oppose taking it out if you wanted to make that part of the motion for approval.
So we're redacting offended is what we're doing? Okay, well, all right. Any other comments or questions for staff on this matter? Commissioner Willoughby?
There are several places where it talks about accessory building units. What is an accessory building unit?
Can you reference which page?
117.
Yeah, I think it actually said accessory
So in
dwelling
that
units.
third paragraph, it's at the end of that, it says, talk for existing single-family residents with somewhat limited lot area, incorporation of accessory dwelling units is a realistic option for increasing density, housing stock, and affordability.
So we actually currently don't allow these by zoning regulations, but it is something that many communities are considering. Accessory dwelling units would be detached accessory residential units. Some people, through zoning regulations, you can control those with special use permits, require who lives in them, how many units. So that is something that I think we anticipate looking into.
Would an example of that be like they deem it the mother-in-law's house, or it's like a tiny house in your backyard kind of thing? Yes.
Any other questions for staff? If not, thank you, staff, and at this point in time, we will reopen the public hearing on the matter. Does anybody from the public wish to weigh in on this matter? You come forward and state your name and address, and I'll read off something to everyone here that wants to comment. Your comments are limited only to the matter under current consideration. We kindly ask that your comments be concise, that you are respectful of all parties. If your comments are the same as previous speakers, then please be brief. We have not established a time limit, and we prefer not to. If you're not making any specific point or otherwise, or are not concise, we will ask you to speed it up or eventually may ask you to stop. Please, sir.
Thank you. Hi, Bill McMurtry, 6121 Valentine, Shawnee, Kansas, 66203. I hope everybody had a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I want to start off after that saying thank you to Lauren for, she mentioned the Valentine, the rerouting proposal and having that removed. We appreciate Lauren's view and take that she took and looked into that. Thank you. We, in Trail Springs, think that the Rogers Road development, if you will, they're on the east side, the 5 units per acre, that's pretty much going to be cottages. That's been discussed between Trail Springs and Lauren and Doug, and we understand that's going to be pretty nice looking. The one concern is the west side of Rogers Road. The west side, as I understand it currently, they could possibly be built up to 45 feet in height. We asked for a restriction of 30 feet in height, simply because of the additional, initially it was supposed to be, if I understood it correctly, 5 to 7 units per acre, and now it's up to 10 units per acre. So as it goes vertically, as it was mentioned earlier, we're adding more in there. It's going to be aesthetically less pleasing, obviously, but also just the amount of traffic that's in that small congested area as it is. The last thing I have is it moved forward. We do have a copy of everything, just like you guys have a copy of. But if we could get something that says, you know, this is our plan, other than this is what we would like to do, or this is what we're hoping to do, if we could get some kind of, we're hoping to eventually have some kind of actual plan to take to the residents of Trail Springs to say, hey, this is what they propose and this is what they would like to do. Other than that, you know, I'm looking real forward to going and getting some seafood up on 75th Street, and I don't have a loud heavy metal band or anything, but I'll see if I can get one together for you, sir. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. McMurtry.
Thank you.
Does anyone else from the public wish to comment on this matter? Seeing no one coming forward, then that will mean the public hearing is finished. It was completed in about 40 days, I believe, because I inadvertently opened it last meeting. So I have a question. Lauren, would you like to address his thoughts on the 30 versus 45 feet on the west part of Rogers Road?
So as of right now, all of Rogers Road, really south of Kevin Tubesing's Stag Spring project, is zoned R1. So those height restrictions apply. I don't know off the top of my head what the height limit is for that. So basically, any rezoning on Roger Road, it would have to comply with whatever the height restrictions are for that zoning district.
Okay, but if our master plan, and this is basically going to be a part of the master plan, then our master plan, if it's saying 45 foot, then is that something that
It
would
doesn't
create a problem?
We don't call out and specify heights within the land use designations.
Okay. Heights are not involved in land use designation.
Correct.
Very fine. So he shouldn't. Please, Stephanie.
Just want to clarify, I think, something that you're asking. So, and maybe for the audience too, this helps. This is a guide. And so right now, we're not rezoning any of the properties that you see. And I think the area that the resident's talking about is Area C on the screen in front of you. So even though Area C right now is called out for a higher density than it is currently, it's not being rezoned as part of this meeting or these amendments. Each of those properties has to come in for a rezoning at a later time, along with a plan from a developer. And I think that was another request from the resident, is seeing what's actually going to be built there. The city doesn't know what's going to be built there, but by making these amendments to the land use guide, we're opening the door essentially for a higher density product to be located at that location that you see on C. So procedurally, this isn't approving anyone's plans or conducting any rezonings. This is just amending a guide. And later on, when someone comes in with a plan, as you know, being on planning commission for a little while here, we review how this guide and that request interact with each other. So this would just be kind of the first step in looking toward a redevelopment in this particular area and the other areas that are being amended on the screen.
Thank you. And I see Mr. McMurtry shaking his head. I think that helps explain it to you as well, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions for staff or commission discussion? Commissioner Wise,
Hearing no further discussion, move that all right, what are the motions here? I don't have it in front of me.
here, if you can read. Chapter 5.
In Chapter 8. Okay. I move that we approve the comprehensive plan changes, amendments to Chapter 5 and Chapter 8 per staff recommendations and as presented in this meeting.
Forward to the governor.
And then also to send the resolution to adopt a comprehensive plan as proposed to the governing body for final approval.
Is there a second? Commissioner Roth,
I'll second it.
there is a motion and a second to approve the comprehensive plans, Chapter 5 and Chapter 8, and adopt them to the comprehensive plan and forward them to the governing body for approval. Yes, Commissioner Peterson.
Ask for clarification on that. Are we saying to leave it as is, or are we taking out the word bedroom?
Well, this is further discussion. So, I would say it was not in the original motion. So, would you like to ask the gentleman if he'd like to add bedroom to that and change his motion? Or you have the ability to vote it down? What?
I will, I can amend the original motion to strike the term bedroom from the text. In addition to closing the public hearing and submitting the approved resolution for the comprehensive plan as proposed, forwarding to the governing body for final approval.
And there's already a second on that. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of forwarding the plan, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Thank you very much. That leaves us down to, of all things, does the staff have anything for us poor old commissioners up here? Does the commission have anything for staff? Mr. Brayley?
Yes. Car City. Can I have an update regarding what's transpiring with Car City and additional capacity for the parking lot, because they are still parking vehicles behind the property up against the rear wall, and it looks horrible.
Well, the last time we talked to them, I believe, was in mid-November, and they're actually looking at getting some vacated land from, I think it was the state, and now we had it, and for Hedge Lane Terrace, and then we were going to transfer some of that land to them so they could actually further expand their inventory area toward Hedge Lane Terrace. So they, I think, prior to actually getting permits for construction, might come back to you for a new or revised site plan that would include that area as well. So I believe that's why they're being a little sluggish with the improvements, is because they might not have the full scope ready of what they want to do now. There's some value in completing all that construction at once rather than in 2 phases. So I can reach out to them tomorrow and ask where they're at with their project and see if they'll be coming back to you soon.
I mean, as the father of 2 teenage boys, I'm a very patient person. But this is something that's been going on, in my opinion, for way too long. And I go back to their original statement where they told us they already had another lot where they could put vehicles, but yet they still continue to park additional vehicles where they're not supposed to. And so you can put me under the bus and make me the bad guy, but this is going on way too long and I'm getting tired of it. Okay, thank you.
No, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Smith?
A little bit intimidated by that. I noticed that it's one of those times I shouldn't say where the governing body declined to approve what's the name of the project out on K7, Berea? Woodsonia. And, I can tell you from a very prominent person that basically said development was dead in Shawnee. Okay. Now, my other question, which scares me more than that, is there anything that you all have heard about some of the commercial development over on that side of town around K7, especially some of the newer things planned, one that is existing there that's actually pulling out? I'd be more specific than but I'd be giving away the confidence.
I can't talk specifics, and I have honestly not heard of anyone per se pulling out, but I do know that even back to the Vantage project that was disapproved, and actually we prevailed in a lawsuit in that case, that apartment developers in particular stopped looking at Shawnee. So I do think our multifamily will probably slow down. But as far as commercial, I'm not aware of anything that's gone by the wayside, but again, there may be economic development folks with the chamber that maybe probably knows more than I do. But at this point, we haven't met with a commercial developer out there in some time in that vicinity of the city.
There might be someone out there who's not coming to visit with you now. And I look, whenever we have something happen like that, we all say, oh man, they blew it, development's dead. But I can tell you there's a lot of folks out there in the development community, in the real estate community, and the legal community who are no longer even going to attempt to bring their clients to Shawnee because they cannot get multifamily approved. Now, it may or may not have been a good project, that obviously was their determination that it was not, for whatever reasons. But I think, I guess from one, I have to give kudos to this commission. And it's a lot easier for us because we don't have the political pressure. And I understand political pressure. I also understand trying to keep your job. Sometimes it keeps you from doing your job. But this commission, I feel, is a great barometer for the way things really should be, because we tend to approve or deny things based on the merit only, and I think we're very open-minded, and we take a lot of heat for that, but I have to give all of you a lot of credit for, sticking your neck out the way you do. I think you get it. You see the big picture. Happy New Year to all of you with a pat on the back. It's worth it. You paid for it. But I commend all of you for your fortitude and the way that you look at the projects as they come along.
Commissioner Nenick.
Not to be redundant and repeat what Commissioner Smith just said, but in my line of business, I do frequently talk to developers, and he is completely correct. It is continuing to get more challenging, and I think as we've seen with some of the developers we've had in town, with all the best of intentions, sometimes it's a struggle getting projects done because they're not sometimes have deepest pocket developers around the metropolitan area. And although they're well-meaning, they probably do quality projects. They don't have the wherewithal. And the ones that have the wherewithal are not counting Shawnee.
Okay, anything else? Oh, man, we're going. Commissioner Braley.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn tonight's meeting.
Is there a second? Commissioner Montgomery.
Second the motion.
The motion is second to conclude the meeting and adjourn. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. We're done. Thank you. Thank you all for being here too.
Yeah.
The kids are about out of college.
I like that speech tonight.